Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. You'll no doubt remember the farmers' protests across Europe that peaked round about this time last year. Rising production costs, bureaucracy and foreign competition were among the drivers of the farmers' movement. Well, the EU Commission responded with a package of measures, and it has now unveiled what it calls a vision for agriculture and food. These measures coincide with the International Salon of Agriculture that's being held in Paris. We're going to talk about that vision with the EU's Commissioner for Agriculture and Food, Christophe Hansen. Before being appointed to this job, he was an MEP representing the Luxembourgish Christian Social Popular Party, and he sat with the Conservative European People's Party in the European Parliament. Commissioner, welcome to the programme.
Hello, nice to meet you.
So this new strategy, I suppose the key word really is attractiveness, isn't it? Because it's a profession that is not seen as being very attractive, and it's difficult to get young people especially to go into this as a career, into farming.
That's exactly the point. I think we have a huge problem, a demographic problem when it comes to the farming community. Less than 12% of EU farmers are below the age of 40, and the average age is above 57. So if we don't change things now, we will have an issue not have sufficient farmers taking up the job, and that is something where we have to work on. I think a very important point is as well to start the business and how to start the business. And there we see that already the access to finance is a huge challenge for the young generation. Another challenge is, of course, the access to land, which comes with the finance as well. And there we need to work on. So the job needs to be profitable as well, and that you need to have a business plan that works. And you rightly said, so we have to work on fairer prices for the farmers, but as well we need to work on simplification, because farmers in the end chose the job not to be behind a desk, filling in forms. They chose it because they want to produce outside on their fields, their crops, but as well with the animals. That is where we need to get them back and to be more competitive again, and being more productive again.
So on the profitability, of course, you do have this directive that's coming into force, I believe, after the summer to guard against unfair practices. That's to say, the big supermarkets underpaying farmers for their work. But between now and then, are they just going to have to make the best of it, or is there any help that they can expect between now and the actual implementation of this directive?
Well, this is going to be a quick procedure, because it's only a limited change to two legislative files, the Common Market Organization and the Unfair Trading Practices Directive. Unfair Trading Practices Directive is very recent. They just got into force last year. So now it's really to address the problems in the cross-border implementation of this legislative piece, in order, if there are disputes, that they can be easily solved, and that is very important. And then, of course, on the Common Markets Organization, we have now written contracts mandatory, so the farmer knows exactly what his input costs are to produce, what he needs as a margin to survive in the end and thrive in the job. And that is why these written contracts will help him now to have the fair prices he deserves. And that is the first step. Of course, in between, we have other legislation. The Unfair Trading Practices Directive is already up and running, and there as well those mandatory contracts are already there, because in principle the farmer, when he requests to have a written contract, the other side, the trader, can't refuse it. And this is something where we need in the meantime, before the new legislation comes, already inform the farmers so that they take it up as well.
You mentioned simplification. That's obviously a key objective, not just of this European Commission, but the European People's Party as well, which you've come from. Your French colleague, Commissioner Stéphane Séjourné, is actually launching what is called a shock of simplification. Is that related to what you're doing on agriculture?
Well, we have different simplification packages, of course, because there are many policy areas. There will be a first simplification package focusing on the applicable agriculture policy right now. I see a lot of margins analyzing as well already the simplification package from last year. And then, of course, I think we have to see it broader as well, because what is impacting, and I have met many of the farming communities in different member states, the questions and concerns I get are often not linked to the agriculture policy, but to environmental policies, to reporting requirements that are not necessarily always necessary. And there we need to look in the broader perspective as well. National laws, I think, are impacting a lot, and the member states need not only to blame Europe, they need to do their homework as well, and that is what we will go for.
You touched on the environment. I want to quote something which the European Environment Bureau said in response to this new vision for agriculture and food. They said there's a notable lack of environmental measures and targets, or indeed of increased budgets for environmental payments to farms. And this is while the sector is responsible for 11% of CO2 emissions, more or less. Does that make sense? Should it be exempt in that way from these environmental targets?
Well, we have seen clearly that the agriculture sector is contributing. The European Code of Auditors, by the way, stated that the green architecture is right to meet our 2030 objectives. So I think that is something we need to acknowledge. And then as well to see that this new eco-regimes, etc., are only there for 1.5 years now. So I think we need to let the policy work there. And I think I'm quite convinced, because when you see the figures you mentioned, 11% of EU emissions come from the agriculture and food producing, including logistics. I think that is something you have to underline. So it's not only the production on the field, there are other sectors as well.
So you have to count in the transport costs, for example.
And then it managed, the sector managed to lower the emissions from 2023 to 2024 by 2%. You can say that's not much, but when you have other policy areas like transport, for example, where there is a target there with the percentage, it only reduced by 1%. So which one is more effective right now? I think what is key is that we incentivize the farmers and not oblige them, because with the financial attractive policies, they will take it up because they know that they are as well dependent on climate and that they are the first victims, and they want to be part of the solution, and that is what we need to incentivize them for.
There was a watering down of the previous strategy when it comes to pesticides use. There was an idea to halve pesticide use by 2030, but that was watered down. Should there be stronger targets on this? Because the European Environment Agency says 80% of European soil is contaminated with pesticide residue. So we should be much more demanding on this question of pesticides in the soil, surely.
Well, the proposal you mentioned, that was indeed to reduce by 50%. I think it was not on all the points, let's say, well thought through, because, for example, there were, when you have had the applicable surface, you excluded were, for example, railway tracks. Why should railway tracks be excluded to reach that target? And then there was as well in the parliament, one political group wanted to have a higher percentage than the other, so they went even further, and that is why the whole file exploded. So I think just focusing on a simple, blunt percentage has not led to success, so we have no progress. I think we need to go more into incentives, but as well into the deployment of new technologies, and they are there. We have to go into acceleration of biopesticides that can be an alternative to chemical pesticides.
Let's talk about a couple of international trade issues, particularly Mercosur, this agreement with Latin American countries, which the Commission concluded negotiations on in December of last year. Do you think President Macron is going to succeed in getting this blocking minority to stop the agreement from actually going through? Because he said at the agricultural salon that he was still looking to block this deal.
Well, that is, of course, the political right of Emmanuel Macron. I will not further comment that. I think it is important to say as well that we have as well a very positive export balance in trade when it comes to agriculture products. We are exporting 70 billion more than we are importing, and a lot of sectors are as well heavily dependent on that. Take, for example, the milk sector with our GI cheeses in the European Union. Well, they would benefit from such an agreement. Wines and spirits that are under pressure currently in the European Union would benefit from it. The olive sector would benefit from it. What is now important is that we give the fair conditions to our farmers, because that is something that they were asked for. They asked for reciprocity in standards. That is included in the vision. They asked for simplification to be more competitive. That is in, and we will deliver on that. So I think it is my role will be to make our agriculture and food production sector more competitive, that they can thrive in the international markets, because they are dependent as well on it.
If you were to give more reciprocity guarantees, would that placate the French government enough, you think, to overcome this opposition from France?
That I'm not sure, but I think that is the right thing to do. Reciprocity. You can't expect that farmers and consumers accept if we prohibit a product in the European Union, a plant protection product, and the very same product is treated with that pesticide is coming in. If it's bad for the bees and human health in the European Union, it is as well outside the European Union. And there, I think it is very legitimate to go into that direction.
On a final point of international trade, agricultural organizations in the EU have sounded the alarm on American protectionism under Donald Trump, or at least that's how it's seen on this side of the Atlantic. Do you think there's a risk of agriculture being dragged into a trade war now that we're seeing measures on steel and aluminium? What about the agricultural sector?
Well, we have the experience from the Trump 1 administration, where in the famous Airbus-Boeing dispute, there were as well tariffs on our agricultural products. I think what is very important now is that this situation can't be excluded, that it will happen again, so we have to prepare for it. And I think there in the vision we have as well clearly the reference to a unity safety net, meaning the policy to strike back and react on coercion and blackmailing like it happened back in time, but as well with a financial envelope to compensate. I think that is very important, because we are strong when we are united, but when this unity is challenged, we are very weak, and that is something we need definitely to address. Furthermore, we need to get into new markets. We are launching now as well, and we have in June a big high-level mission to Japan with our agriculture and food producing sector, in order to get them into those markets, that they have alternatives where they are not being blackmailed like it happened back in time. So this is really the way forward, to do our homework, get the markets right, and diversify as well our economic partners that want to play on fair condition. I think that is very important.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for this wide-ranging discussion. Christophe Hansen, the EU Commissioner for Agriculture and Food. Do stay with us. In part 2 of Talking Europe, we'll continue discussing this very topic with my panel of MEPs at the European Parliament. Do stay with us.